And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again, and in a recent video, which I called Popular Comics It's Okay Not to Like, we talked about All-Star Superman. At the end of that video, I did in fact tease All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, which is a series that was actually the other twin part of this All-Star line, and actually came out before All-Star Superman. Whilst All-Star Superman gets all the awards and gets all the praise, All-Star Batman and Robin gets all the hate. But in that sense, this pair of comics, or this pair of series, is very similar to something I looked at a few days ago, which was the way of comparing Batman Hush to Superman for Tomorrow, with Superman for Tomorrow being a little known series. Well, in this case, with the All-Star duo, is actually Batman, which is the much maligned and little known series. So no further ado, in today's video, which I'm calling Unpopular Comics It's Okay to Like, I'm going to talk about this, one of my favourite Batman stories. I will point out, I don't view this as a guilty pleasure. I don't think there should be guilty pleasures when you're playing video games, reading comics, or anything like that. There are just things that you like, and everyone should be allowed to like whatever they want to like. With that in mind, please keep it civil in the comments down below. I've already had lots of people providing heckling points in other videos when I've occasionally mentioned I like this series. There's no need for that. If you leave abusive comments to myself or to other viewers, I'll get those deleted. If you leave racist comments, which I occasionally get, I'll get those deleted as well. So please, let's keep it civil down there. So what do we have here? We have Absolute All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, the Absolute Edition, which I am very, very happy to have. The cover is beautiful. It has these, what they call spot UV. I don't know if you can see. It's, you can't see, hang on. It's the thing where the writing and certain bits of it, here you can see Batman's cape, are sort of like a silver shiny bit, and the rest of it is all matte. That's called spot UV. It's quite a cool little effect. And it's one of the very few Absolute editions that has that. That said, it's an Absolute edition that does not have a dust jacket. It just has the raw hardcover, which is absolutely fine by me. So, what is this? Well, this is the first comic that came out as part of the All-Star line. This was All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, written by Frank Miller and drawn by Jim Lee. So already we can see the parallels with the previous video I did on Hush and Superman for Tomorrow, where Jim Lee was the main driving force. It's Jim Lee artwork used to sell the comic, and we can see that's happening here, and again partnered up with Frank Miller in this case. This came out between 2005 2008, so it did start coming out before Superman. A couple of things, please don't get this confused with All-Star Batman, which is a later series that was done by Scott Snyder. It was done right at the end of the New 52, right at the beginning of DC Rebirth. I believe it was 18 issues or something like that. This is nothing to do with that. Secondly, this is a maxi series. It's technically only 10 issues. It never actually finished. It just kind of ends on a cliffhanger because the sales and the critical reception was so bad it got cancelled. So there we have it. It's kind of a, this will never be finished. Yeah, this is, as I say, it's written by Frank Miller, and it is absolutely, absolutely maligned. What can I say about it? Well, I mean, firstly, let's have a look at the artwork. Artwork is absolutely staggering. It has all 10 issues. It's worth noting that the first 9 issues, so 1 to 9, are collected in a trade paperback and in a standard size hardcover, but issue 10 was kind of orphaned, and the only way to get issue 10 in a collection is to buy the Absolute Edition, which I obviously recommend. Got a bit of an introduction here, and then it goes straight into the artwork, and the artwork is phenomenal, absolutely brilliant. Jim Lee at the top of his game. But listen, then we have the Batman get introduced, we have the Batman arrive, end of issue 1, grabs Robin, "On your feet, soldier," is the opening line. You've just been drafted into a war. At this point I should probably just pause and point out that the characterization of Batman in the story is absolutely universally reviled and became meme-worthy and absolutely hated within the comic community. I don't agree with that. And in order to explain why I don't agree with that, I'm going to do something a bit weird. I'm going to do a video inside a video. Because there's another series I've been thinking of putting together just called Thomas Judge's Random Thoughts. And that actually is key for what we're talking about here. So no further ado, let's think a little bit about what Batman's personality actually is and actually should be.
And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge doing a video in a video, I suspect, depending on how I edit this. And what I want to talk about today is just Batman's personality. This is an interesting topic for me for lots of reasons, partly because I will hopefully be putting this inside a larger video defending All-Star Batman and Robin and saying that I like it and why maybe it's okay to like it, or at least just read it and make it up your own mind. But also, I'm not a massive Batman fan. I'm definitely not as big a Batman fan as most people that I come across who are in the comics community. And so I just wanted to put out my take on what I think about Batman's personality, which isn't necessarily a grounded or realistic take. I mean, we are talking about superheroes here, but I just wanted to put out just some of my random thoughts and just some of my observations. So to start off with, when we're talking about Batman's personality, an easy way to look at it, and a really common and accessible way to look at it, is to look at the film depictions of Batman. Let's start with the original Batman, at least as far as most people are concerned, which is Adam West. So Adam West from Batman in the 60s had a pretty hilarious take on Batman in that his Batman and his Bruce Wayne were essentially the same person. They sounded the same, they acted the same, they had the same personality, and other than just wearing a cape and a cowl, there was no difference between the two characters. And that's fine. It was part of the hokey, jokey, camp, and frankly very endearing Batman in the 60s. Subsequent to that, we had Batman in 1989, which was Michael Keaton's depiction of Batman, which probably, to my mind, is probably the best on-screen depiction of Batman I've ever seen. And the reason for that is the clear demarcation between the personality of Bruce Wayne and the personality of Batman. Batman is focused, clinical, extremely effective, dangerous, very, very driven. Whereas the Bruce Wayne personality is kind of bumbling, absent-minded, um, not necessarily a playboy, just kind of a sort of goofy eccentric. The interesting thing to note about Keaton's Batman, though, is that the Bruce Wayne characterization and the Batman characterization are genuinely two different personalities. One of the things I loved about Batman, and in fact Batman Returns as well, is that it really depicts the character of Bruce Wayne as being its own distinct personality, almost as if there's a multiple personality disorder. In the very first Batman, there's loads of scenes where Bruce Wayne, I remember once he's at a party and he puts down a glass and it kind of slips off the edge and Alfred catches it smoothly. And it's very cute and it kind of highlights how Alfred's always picking up after his bumbling master. But it's not any kind of contrivance. This isn't any artifice in the characterization that Michael Keaton does. Like, this is what Bruce Wayne's personality is. When he's Bruce Wayne, when he's wearing a shirt and tie, he's basically just a bumbling, forgetful person. He's not putting on a mask. He's not putting on a front. He actually has the personality of someone who's a bit of a goof. But then he puts on the cape and the cowl, and what you have is Michael Keaton's Batman, who's dark and menacing and intense, and just done really well. And this is an interesting characterization of Batman because what we're talking about isn't, oh, Batman is actually Batman, then Bruce Wayne's the veneer, and then Bruce Wayne's the real Bruce Wayne, and then Batman's the veneer. It's nothing like that. What we have are two distinctly different personalities, and there's no kind of artifice and there's no kind of contrivance by the character to be, oh, I'm going to switch on my Bruce Wayne personality now. When you watch it, you genuinely get the feeling that Bruce Wayne is a bit bumbling and absent-minded. I remember famously in this in the second movie, he wasn't aware what his gazpacho soup was. Oh, the soup's cold, and actually, no, the soup's not cold. It's meant to be cold. One gets the impression that was he wearing the cape and the cowl during that scene? He would have known that because he's the world's greatest detective. He's got loads of information at his fingertips. It really is a case of what we have here is a split personality, which I personally don't think is a great or healthy way to display Batman or to consider it, but it's a really interesting take on it. In fact, the only time in these movies that there's any kind of connection between the two personalities is the one time where Jack Nicholson's Joker confronts Bruce Wayne in the character of Bruce Wayne at Vicky Vale's apartment. And Bruce starts to slide into the Batman personality without having the cape and the cowl. And that's the one moment when there's any kind of overlap between these two. Otherwise, you get a very clear, very distinct sense of there's a genuine multiple personality disorder at play here. But hey, that's the Michael Keaton Batman. Let's move on to the next one. We've got Batman Forever and the Val Kilmer Batman. I have nothing to say about this because I literally can remember nothing about it. So let's move on. We've got Batman Forever, which I will be honest, I recently watched and I do own on DVD and I do find to be quite a fun movie. It's horrific. It's terribly, terribly bad. But I enjoy it. Not a guilty pleasure, But nonetheless, it's a fun, stupid movie. If you can enjoy Adam West Batman, you can enjoy George Clooney Batman. And the reason for that is that George Clooney actually plays his Batman in a very similar way to Adam West, which is that his Batman and his Bruce Wayne are the exact same character. They act the same, they talk the same, they have all the same mannerisms. It's basically a playboy who occasionally dresses up in a bat costume. And again, that makes for a terrible depiction of the Batman and Bruce Wayne personalities. But that's what it is. That's what George Clooney went with, and that's why it was rightly reviled as being a ridiculous, hokey kind of depiction of the Dark Knight. Let's move on to one of the more popular versions of the Dark Knight, which is the Christian Bale Batman. I'm a big fan of Christian Bale's American Psycho. I think his depiction of Patrick Bateman was fantastic. And the reason I think he does well here in the Batman trilogy is that his depiction of Bruce Wayne, when it needs to be, is very evocative of his depiction of Patrick Bateman. And he does an excellent Bruce Wayne. He's very good at the kind of the playboy who just doesn't give a shit about anyone else. And, you know, despite a couple of missteps in the first movie in that regard, he basically holds that line down very well for the rest of the trilogy. However, his Batman was rubbish. I didn't enjoy it at all. The horrible throat cancer voice he puts on, just the ridiculous overacting. I didn't find it enjoyable at all. And whilst it's clearly, oh, he's playing the role of Bruce Wayne and he's playing the role of Batman, and you never really see the real person behind either of them. His depiction of Batman isn't one that I personally enjoyed. His depiction of Bruce Wayne is one that I did, just simply because he is essentially Patrick Bateman in that role. One thing that I always thought would be interesting in The Dark Knight, which is the second film of the Christian Bale trilogy, is the scene where the Joker attacks Bruce Wayne's penthouse and his party, and it's the scene where he first meets Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it's actually really interesting because it's the first time Heath Ledger in makeup was interacting with Maggie Gyllenhaal, and that's her unedited, genuine response to him in the makeup freaking her out. But what I always thought was a missed opportunity there was they shouldn't have put Bruce Wayne in the Batman outfit. That's essentially what happens. Bruce Wayne goes off, gets into the panic room, gets in the Bat outfit, turns up as Batman, standard Batman fight. But there's a couple of moments before that where he's walking around essentially kicking ass, essentially beating the shit out of the Joker's henchmen as Bruce Wayne in his tux. And that was a really interesting momentary glimpse into, right, there is this thing that combines Bruce Wayne and combines Bruce Wayne with Batman. And I do wonder to myself what it would have been like had that entire scene been him staying in character in the tuxedo as Bruce Wayne and then just lurking from shadow to shadow and just knocking people out and doing his stuff. That would have been far more interesting to me other than the direction they went with. But generally speaking, I am not a fan of the Nolan Batman trilogy at all. So I guess I'm slightly biased there. Let's move on again. We've got Ben Affleck's Batman. Ben Affleck's Batman, I think it's fair to say his depiction of Batman and of Bruce Wayne, it's very hard to really gauge. Simply because there wasn't a standalone Batman movie. He was only in Justice League, he was in Batman versus Superman. It's really hard to kind of get a feel of what he's like as Batman in the outfit and what he's like as Bruce Wayne in the tuxedo. And so I don't really have much I can sort of say or add to that. Overall, what I will say is that it was a bit unfulfilling, and it's a shame that we're not going to see sort of like a standalone Batman movie. What we did see then subsequently was Robert Pattinson as Batman in the movie The Batman. The issue I have here is that the characterization of him in the cape and the cowl is identical to him as Bruce Wayne. He's a goth emo with eye makeup on, growling and scowling and generally being very depressed the entire time. There's no change in body language, no change in tone, no change in the cadence of how he speaks or what he does. It was ridiculous. It's poorly done. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad movie. The movie had its strengths and it's had its weaknesses. But the depiction of Batman, very much like Adam West's depiction of Batman or George Clooney's depiction of Batman, is the exact same person whether or not they're wearing the mask. At least Christian Bale tried to have a difference, and whilst I personally didn't find his Batman engaging, I found his Patrick Bateman engaging. And obviously, of course, you've got the gold standard so far, which is Michael Keaton, who essentially is playing someone with a multiple personality problem. But I think in all these cases, there's something to be said about there being an unfulfilling aspect of how Batman has been characterized so far. And I think the reason for that is that when it comes to Batman, people have to think about Bruce Wayne, people think about Batman within the cape and the cowl, but everyone seems to forget Matches Malone. Now, for those that don't know, Matches Malone is a staple of the Batman mythos. He's been around since Batman issue 242, which was like in the early 70s, I think. Long story short, what happened? He's an actual criminal. He dies. Bruce Wayne, or rather, Batman takes over his identity and essentially cultivates the Matches Malone criminal identity as something where he can go around the criminal underworld, getting access to like criminals and gangs and lurking in dark places in ways that Batman couldn't and Bruce Wayne couldn't. So it's like another third personality he has. He doesn't use him very often. He's kind of cool in a kind of he looks a bit like Magnum PI. It's quite funny. He's got a mustache. He's always chewing a match, hence the name Matches Malone. And he's got this kind of cool kind of almost 70s noir like gumshoe kind of approach. Like you can imagine him talking like calling women dames and things like that. It's kind of a funny, kind of a caricatured character, but I really enjoy anything where we see Matches Malone. What I will point out is that by overlooking the idea of Matches Malone, we're overlooking a really fundamental part of the character of Bruce Wayne, Batman, whatever you want to call him. Because Matches Malone is a contrivance. He's a construction of artifices and carefully contrived personality quirks to create a an alter ego, which is a criminal alter ego, that means he can infiltrate criminal society. That's what Matches Malone is. And in the same regard, that's what Bruce Wayne needs to be. Bruce Wayne needs to be a carefully constructed set of contrivances, lies, and misleading kind of clues and hints that give you the impression that Bruce Wayne is just some playboy that's a bit of a loser, hasn't got his shit together. And Batman at his best is when we see Batman really depict this playboy kind of lifestyle of Bruce Wayne as a kind of bumbling incompetent, a bit of a lech, a bit of a drunkard. Christian Bale hit that reasonably well, especially at the end of Batman Begins. And a few other roles have hit that quite well, either the bumbling thing or the lech thing, etc., etc. That's what the Batman would characterize Bruce Wayne as. Bruce Wayne would be as much of a fake personality as Matches Malone is a fake personality. What that then leaves us with in this triumvirate of Bruce Wayne, Matches Malone, and Batman is, well, is Batman the fake personality as well? Is Batman meant to be this dark, gruff, really rasping, really violent, homicidal maniac, basically, who doesn't actually kill people nonetheless? And then in between all three of these is some kind of like actual human being who's putting on these personalities the same way you and I would put on a hat. Is that the case? Or is Batman in the cape and the cowl, is that the real Bruce? Is that the real personality of the person behind it all? It's an interesting thing to consider. And I think from my point of view, that's what we need to think about when we think about Batman. It's not about the duology between Bruce Wayne and Batman. It's really about a triumvirate of personalities. Because the Matches Malone personality, although often overlooked, is a really important way of just pointing out that the character we're talking about can keep an entire life, an entire personality, an entire history, and a set of social interactions and everything, and all that perfectly in keeping. He's a sublime actor that can delude and confuse everyone around him. And if he's doing that with Matches Malone, why can't he be doing that with Bruce Wayne? Why can't he be doing that with the Batman character? Another reason I have to say that I think my take on Batman is slightly different to most people is that I don't really subscribe to the idea of the kind of the Bat God character. The Bat God character is what I call Batman ever since Morrison introduced Batman in the JLA in the late 90s, where Batman is essentially just fucking indestructible and incredible. Like he always has a plan, he always sorts out everything, he has the answers to everything, he can do anything. Not only does he essentially defeat the equivalent of the entire Justice League single-handedly in New World Order, the opening arc of that JLA, but in issue 8, for example, he actually there's a bit where he's taken hostage by the Key, as is the entire JLA, and they're all put in these parallel kind of Matrix-style psychological delusions where they're all imagining these fantasy worlds, and literally he just stands up and goes, "No, I'm meant to be 50 years old, but I have the resting heart rate of a 33-year-old man who's asleep. Therefore, I cannot be in this environment." And it's like, dude, really? Really? Is that like, this is ridiculous level of superhuman bat godlike ability. But that's how Morrison wrote him. And I think after that, for the longest time, Batman's been viewed very much as a flawed a flawless hero. I mean, you take it right up until something like Batman R.I.P. the end of the Morrison era of Batman. In Batman R.I.P., he reprograms his own mind just in case he comes under psychological attack. It's just this idea of Batman being incredibly perfect is not one that I subscribe to. Um, I gather this is why the Tom King Batman run has always been quite controversial, because he doesn't have a flawless Batman. He is a flawed Batman. Haven't read Tom King yet. I'll get to it soon. We'll talk about that then. But for now, I just want to point out I'm not a fan of this idea of Batman being absolutely perfect and flawless and being the Bat God. I'm very much into the idea of Batman being flawed and Bruce Wayne being a mask and a veneer in the same way Matches Malone is. Those are my thoughts, everyone. That's what I think about Batman. But to bring it full circle, this is a video within a video, in theory. And to bring it back to Frank Miller's depiction of Batman, let's have a look at it. In Batman Year One, we have a very clear dark and brooding Batman, which is kind of the real personality as far as we can see. And then we have the affectation of Bruce Wayne. I remember a very pivotal scene in Batman Year One, where Commissioner Gordon goes to see Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne is essentially he's called over a model or a prostitute or something, and he essentially pretends that he spent the night with her, and he doesn't even know her name, and he doesn't know if she speaks English, and like he's reeking of booze, and he's sort of like he plays his whole kind of messy Lothario playboy role really well. And Jim Gordon kind of buys it, kind of doesn't, but it's like, yeah, what we have there is Batman the psychotic in the cape and the cowl, and then Bruce Wayne as, in the early days, a slightly clumsy act at being a playboy, but we can imagine that act gets much, much better. That's one end of the Miller universe. The other end of the Miller universe, of course, is Dark Knight Returns, where you've got Batman who essentially kills off the Bruce Wayne character. Bruce Wayne is buried by the end of Dark Knight Returns, and all you have left is Batman the psychopath in the Batcave with Robin and all his Bat toys, just being psychopathic. That kind of makes sense as well when you look at it through that lens. So as a result, when you look at All-Star Batman, yes, I completely understand All-Star Batman is something that seems a bit messy and a bit clunky, and the characterization seems horrific. Welcome, soldier, you've been drafted to a war. Really? Is that the sort of thing you say to a traumatized orphan? Well, maybe that is what you say if you're a bit of a mentalist, basically. If you're psychopathic, if you've got your own mental problems, if you're really a Kevlar-wearing sadist, then yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe you will take enjoyment in the fact that you're a billionaire making whatever toys you want to make. You can make a Batmobile, you can make a Batwing, you can do all these things. You run around beating up anyone you want with impunity. Maybe you would revel in it. Maybe you would say that you're the goddamn Batman. I don't know. What I would say is that I don't have any fragility about this idea that Batman needs to be perfect and flawless and be the Bat God. And I'm very much open to the idea that there's a triumvirate of personalities between Batman, the artifice of Bruce Wayne, the artifice of Matches Malone, and perhaps Batman himself as an artifice. But I'm willing to believe that actually Batman himself is actually the real personality of this person. And in order to regularly or every day put on this mask and pretend to be something else, pretend to be Bruce Wayne or pretend to be Matches Malone, you'd have to be a little bit psychotic. To do that properly and to do it well, you'd have to be Patrick Bateman. And I think that's an important thing to try to keep in mind. At least that's something I try to keep in mind. We'll cut back to the normal video in just a second, but I just want to leave you with this note, which is a quote from Wikipedia. It's an article by John Morris, writing for the Hi-Hat, who actually named All-Star Batman and Robin one of the best superhero comics of 2006. And this is what he says. He finds the All-Star take on Batman an intriguing alternative take on a character long reimagined to the point of incoherence. Surely the readers as a whole have seen Batman the tortured soul, Batman the awkward father figure, Batman the authoritarian, and Batman the zillion other paternal character archetypes countless times before, under the stewardship of a few dozen other authors. Why not time for a simple, scant 12-issue arc about a Batman who might just be what a control-obsessed, Kevlar-suited sadist would be like in real life, which is to say, distinctly unpleasant. It's unsavory, sure, but who buys Batman comics because he's warm and cuddly?
Okay, hopefully that was helpful. Back to the Absolute Edition. Hopefully you hadn't forgotten we were looking at this. In terms of this, we've got, again, like I said, amazing artwork. We've got Batman, just look at this, it's amazing. We've got Batman basically being the psychopathic, brutal, sort of Kevlar-wearing lunatic. As you can see, sort of reveling in himself, being the Batman, being the way that he is, and so on. If you don't like the story, if what I've just said in that little cutaway about Batman's personality and what he should and shouldn't be and what does and doesn't make sense and what I do and don't like about this, if you're not interested in any of that, that's fine. The artwork's incredible. It's worth buying just for the artwork alone, as well as the unusual depiction of the various other characters. I mean, just looking at this, how underrated is this artwork? On that note, there's just one thing I want to point out. This Absolute Edition, it's one of the reasons I wanted to show this, this Absolute Edition does something I have never seen in another DC Absolute Edition. Brace yourselves. Do you know what? I'm going off page. Okay, hang on. There's going to be a moment of editing while we get to see this whole thing. So here we are. This is one single fold-out page of the Batcave. I mean, whether or not you like this, whether or not you like the writing, whether or not the memes and the tropes get to you, god damn, that is impressive. This single fold-out page alone is worth the cost of the Absolute Edition. Which, by the way, is still very affordable. I think it's at £60 on Amazon last time I checked. How amazing is this? This is like, it's a landmark image for Batman. Alright, bit of nifty editing there to try and get all that. I need a bigger table. Or I need a Skycam that's further away. But that alone, if that hasn't convinced you to at least check this out, I don't know what will. Like, that is just incredible. As I say, I enjoy the storyline. I think it's an interesting depiction of Batman. And it's definitely a much more flawed, much more broken version of Batman than anything we've seen previously, and I enjoy that. It's very much in keeping with Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns characterization. Yes, his characterization of Wonder Woman in this is quite problematic, and if not, I don't know if it's misogynistic, as it is just absolutely bonkers. But nonetheless, it is absolutely, it's fun. It is a fun read. As long as you don't sort of deify Batman and expect him to be the Bat God under all circumstances, then this is just a good fun read with absolute exceptional artwork. And it really made me curious to see where it was going to go. I mean, we've already seen Canary, we've seen Wonder Woman, we've seen Superman, and now we're seeing his depiction of Batgirl, which just looks really cool. Like, how cool is that image as a poster? So, yes, this is an unpopular comic. Unpopular is not even the word. It's hated. This is a reviled comic. But it is brilliant artwork, interesting storyline. It does something different that hasn't been done before. Does it do it well? Yeah, I mean, I think it achieves what it intends to achieve, and I'm happy with that. I thought it was good. I just thought it was, forget that, I thought it was great. I thought it was really interesting, really weird depiction of the Joker, really dark and messed up. Is it perfect? No, by no means is it perfect. Does it deserve the hate? No. It definitely doesn't deserve the hate, and I think it only gets the hate because people just like to pile onto these things. Once it starts to get some criticism, people want to pile onto it more and more, and of course it does do a lot to kind of pull apart the myth of Batman as the ultimate kind of playboy superhero archetype where everyone wants to be him. Like I say, I'm in a different position because I'm not a massive Batman fan, not by a large margin, and so as a result of that, like this sort of storyline where he's fighting the other heroes and it's all a little bit brutal and all a little bit crazy, it's something that I'm just well up for. I thought it was great. The artwork is so consistent. It is so good. If nothing else, check this out just for the artwork. Interesting point on issue 10. I believe with issue 10 there was a whole series of problems with the way this was distributed or the way this was published. Yeah, so you can see here, originally, the first publication of this actually had all the swear words in. And we're not just talking about words like shit and crap. We're talking about the F-bomb, the C-bomb, you know, like major swear words that ended up getting published and getting distributed in error. So here it's all redacted and tidied up. But originally it was originally published unedited and uncensored, which is pretty mental when you think about it. And then it has amazing extras, the complete script and pencil art for the entire first issue, which is just brilliant. It kills me that they haven't done a All-Star Batman and Robin unwrapped the way that they did with Hush and things like that, because it would just be fantastic. So, I'm not going to go on too long. Sorry, I've already gone on too long already. My point is, this story is hated. This story is unfairly hated. I really enjoy it. The Batman in it is crazy. He might not be your Batman, but ultimately this is out of continuity. This is the Batman from the Millerverse. This is the Batman that started off with Batman Year One, who was hostile and crazy, and ends with the Dark Knight Returns, who's psychopathic and unhinged. So this, as being the middle Batman, absolutely makes sense to me. And what I'm going to do is actually drop a video on the Millerverse in the near future to kind of tie all that up for you. What I would recommend is please make up your own mind on this. You will have heard loads of hostile negative things, and maybe you'll read it and you'll agree with them all. That's absolutely fine. But I would strongly recommend reading it yourself, having a look at the artwork yourself, and reading it just with that mentality of, well, how do you expect Batman to act? Like, what kind of Batman fan are you? What kind of Batman do you want to see? And what kind of different interpretation of Batman do you want to see? And finally, if you do enjoy it, don't feel bad, you're not alone. This is an unpopular comic, but I'm telling you, as Thomas Judge, it's okay to like it.
All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.